Good morning. Welcome to our webinar this morning. Thank you for joining us. You should be able to now see my screen and hear me clearly. If you do have any questions throughout the webinar today, you'll see the questions panel. I'll come on to that in just a second as well. Before we begin, after the webinar today, we will send you the recording. So we are recording the webinar. You'll get an email maybe a couple of hours after the webinar ends. There'll be a link to the recording. You can watch it back. Feel free to share that recording with your colleagues or anybody else within the organization that you want to see the content today. Like I mentioned, there's a questions panel within the webinar interface, so you might need to expand that, but you can ask all of your questions in there. And we really encourage you to do that because it's really great to be interactive in these sessions, and do ask as many questions as you like. We've got some time at the end of the presentation today where we'll review those questions. We'll answer as many as we can. If there's any that we can't answer, then we'll get back to you afterwards. So do ask away. It's great to see some interaction. It's good to see that from our point of view, and good to answer your questions as well. There will be a survey at the end, and it's just 4 or 5 questions. So when the webinar ends, a browser will open, or it might open a new tab in your browser, and there's just a few questions. If you can answer those, it will enable us to continue to make good and relevant webinars going forwards as well. My name is Fergus Craig. My role is Business Development Manager at Cadcorp. I work with our commercial customers and our housing customers. I'm going to be joined shortly with my colleague, Simon Parker. Simon's our pre-sales team leader. Simon's going to be demonstrating the concepts that we're going to be talking about today. And Lee Williams from emapsite is going to be presenting this morning. So we're going to hand over to Lee in just a few minutes, and Lee's going to be providing the main content of the presentation this morning before handing over to Simon, who will demonstrate the concepts utilizing Cadcorp web mapping and GIS technology. So you'll learn a little bit about Cadcorp to start with, and then I'm going to hand over to Lee. He's going to introduce emapsite, talk about the land registry data, which is the topic of today's webinar, and the benefits and the limitations. And then we're going to hand over to Simon, who's going to demonstrate these concepts using use cases, using Cadcorp technology, and then we're going to come back to me, and we'll have a look at those questions and answer as many as we can at the end. We expect it will be about 45 minutes today. It might be 50 minutes, but around that, to give you an idea of timings. So we've got a poll to start with. Let me launch this poll. The first question is, does your organization use land registry data? So you should see that poll question in front of you. You should have 2 boxes, a yes and a no, and a submit button. If you can click those, it'd be really great to see what the audience is, what their experience is with this type of data, and it's really useful to get some feedback from you. It's also a really good indicator to make sure the webinar is working for you today as well. So we're getting lots of results in, which is good. I can see the live results coming in here, and nearly everybody has answered. So that's really interesting. Actually, so 86% of you are using land registry data, and 14% aren't. So that's really interesting. Many of you are already using this data, so that's really good. Those organizations, you'll learn about different use cases, different ways you can use the data, different data sets that are available. You might not be aware of all the different land registry data sets, and there's a good percentage which aren't using the data as well. So you'll learn a lot about what this is and how it works and how you can get access to it. So I'll close that question, and we have another one for you as well. So let me launch this one. You should be able to see that question now. Is your organization considering investing in GIS or web mapping and data? So we find that these webinars, we've been doing quite a few over the last couple of months. Organizations are using these webinars to get an understanding of the technology and the data and what benefits this can bring to your organization. So from our point of view, it's really good to understand whether you're in the process of building a business case or it's something you're planning to do for the future. Maybe you're already using the technology and the data and you're just keen to understand different ways in which you can make benefit of it, which is great too. So thank you very much for answering that question. I'll leave it just a few seconds. I think there's some more results coming in. But that's really good feedback for us. It enables us to continue the conversation with you where appropriate as well. Excellent. So yeah, many of you are actually. So a really big percentage of you have said yes to that question, which is excellent. So I've closed that now. To introduce Cadcorp, some of you may not be familiar with Cadcorp. So we are a software development company. We create the Cadcorp Spatial Information System, and we call that Cadcorp SIS for short. And Cadcorp SIS is a web, mobile, and desktop mapping application. So the desktop mapping application is a GIS, a Geographical Information System, and we've got web and mobile technology as well, which I'll review in just a second. We work in these industry sectors a lot, so we've got lots of housing and local government and central government customers, emergency services, insurance infrastructure, but we've got lots of customers that don't fall into these particular sectors as well, but they tend to be the organisations that we talk to in the UK. We also have partners throughout the rest of the world who utilise Cadcorp technology and make that available for their customers. So Cadcorp SIS is widely used all around the world. So as I said, the Spatial Information System, Cadcorp SIS, is web, mobile, and desktop mapping applications. So the web and the mobile provide a really easy to use, intuitive, interactive web mapping application. So anyone should be able to use it. It's not designed to have really detailed GIS functionality. It's designed to be really easy to use, but it's really powerful. So it connects to all of your data sources, all of your geographical data. It's a corporate solution that can bring lots of information together and provide spatial analysis and visualization and reporting to end users of that application. They could be people internal to the organization or members of the public or third-party organizations. It's really easy to share that out. So it can either be cloud hosted and managed by Cadcorp, or it can be an on-premise installation, a more traditional approach. So we offer both options. And then the desktop GIS, Cadcorp SIS Desktop, is a geographical information system that has loads of functionality in there for really detailed analysis and creating data, editing data and reporting on that. There's lots of functionality in there. And Simon's going to be using both of these applications when we hand over to him in a few minutes' time. Again, desktop can be cloud hosted as well. So we did a webinar on that very recently. So if you want to know more about cloud hosting, Cadcorp SIS Desktop or Cadcorp SIS Web Map, do let us know and we can send over the links to those webinars if you didn't join us previously. So this is what Cadcorp SIS Desktop looks like, really familiar Microsoft Office type user interface, but with lots of functionality and lots of capability to really analyze geographical data. And Cadcorp SIS Web Map, as I mentioned, is access to a web browser, and it's got that easy to use, intuitive user interface where you can visualize and analyze geographical data via a web browser, making it really easy. And it's also available on a mobile device as well, so it can be created in such a way that a mobile device can access it appropriately for the size of the screen, which works really well. So that's introducing Cadcorp and the technology. I'm now going to hand over to Lee Williams from emapsite, who's going to talk to you about the topic today, which is navigating HM Land Registry data. And as I said, when Lee's going to hand over to my colleague Simon Parker, who's going to demonstrate these concepts and these use cases to you. Thanks, Lee.
Thank you very much. Sorry, thank you very much, Fergus. Good morning, everyone. As Fergus mentioned, I work for emapsite, and for over 20 years, emapsite have been providing geospatial data, location intelligence to thousands of clients worldwide across multiple sectors, from housing associations, government, local authorities, consultancies, insurance, and infrastructure clients. And today, I'm going to give you a brief overview of one of our data sets, the HM Land Registry data. After I've gone through the data, I'll hand you over to Simon. I'm going to take you through the process of actually using the data within the Cadcorp system. A quick note before I go on to the next slide is that basically this data is only available for England and Wales at the moment. Hopefully in the near future, registrars of Scotland data will become available like the data available for England and Wales. So I'm just going to give you a brief overview of the emergence and the accessibility of the land registry data. So on the next slide, you'll see the publication of the 2017 Housing White Paper, Fixing Our Broken Housing Market. Basically detailed the commitment to achieve the comprehensive registration of land in England and Wales by 2030. Many landowners, asset owners, housing associations, local authorities and government bodies were faced with the two very important questions. What do we own and what we don't own? And another driver in this has been the emergence and the forming of the Geospatial Commission. For those of you who may be unaware, the Geospatial Commission was established in 2018. Basically, it's responsible for setting the UK's geospatial strategy, and its aim is to actually unlock the significant impact, both economic and social and environmental opportunities offered by location data. And what they did is they actually released on open data license the commercial and corporate ownership data. And on the next slide, what we'll do, we'll have a look at the CCOD and the OCOD. So basically, they opened up the commercial and corporate open ownership data. Over 3 million rows of data in itself. A top tip, if you download the data, it won't go into Excel. I think that Excel's limited to around about 1 million rows. It contains information such as company name and address, price paid, country of incorporation, along with other bits of information, which are very, very useful. And on the next slide, it will show you the categories. So each organization has been categorized. And as you can see, number of categories for housing associations. You categorize in LLPs, local authorities, government bodies, county councils, corporate bodies. So it's a nice categorized way. The issue, I won't say it's an issue, but this data has a lack of a geospatial element regarding the land and the asset itself. What emapsite have done, as you can see on the next slide, is we've purchased the rights to actually distribute the national polygon dataset. And this dataset shows the indicative shape and position of each boundary of registered land in England and Wales, freehold and leasehold title. The dataset has actually 25 million, or just over 25 million titles and 28 million polygons. It includes shape, polygon identification, title number, creation date, update date when people are updating the polygons themselves, and also the version of the polygon. What I've actually done here is I've actually purposely highlighted the sentence, HM Land Registry, index polygons are mapped against Ordnance Survey Master Map. For those of you who are members of PSMA or OSMA, it may not mean much, but for organizations who are not members and may purchase Master Map on commercial terms, remember any land registry polygon purchase would incur a derived data royalty payable to the Ordnance Survey if you didn't have a Master Map. Jumping back to the Geospatial Commission, as from tomorrow, I'm pleased to say that now there's no longer a derived data charge for land registry polygons. Therefore, this data set is becoming more accessible and more cost effective for clients to use. And what we've done is we've joined up this national polygon data set with the corporate and commercial ownership data and the overseas ownership data. And on the next slide, it just shows you a visualization of what these two data sets look like. And this is for Brighton. As you can see, Simon has categorized it under ownership by housing associations, limited companies, local authorities. So that's just a general overview. Simon will go into it in more detail on how to do that, and I'll go into the reasons why organizations use this data. But this just gives you a quick overview of that. So why do organizations actually use this data? So what does my organization own? What is actually registered against the company name or names? Fergus, can we go through 2 slides if possible? And the next one? Excellent, cheers. So what does my organization own? You know, many of you have gone to Land Registry, filled out your company name, got your polygons back, and uploaded it into your GIS system. We do the same, but slightly different. What we actually do, we take your company name, we take your company registration number, we search on these. We also search with a little bit of fuzzy logic, looking at all the various names that it can go in. You've got to remember, this is a manual process. And we found, such examples like Notting Hill Housing have actually been registered under Nottingham Hill. So we make sure that we're trying to cover as many bases as possible with regards to your land ownership. And one of the key things that we actually do is we actually provide you with the wider area. So if you've got a polygon that's registered under your name, we'll provide you with a wider geospatial area of land registry data. So 50 meter, 100 meter, 200, 300 meter buffering of these polygons themselves. And this leads nicely into the next slide, which basically details what I don't own. What is unregistered? What you'll find, and what we have found on numerous occasions, are little pockets of land that I've highlighted here that you wouldn't normally see if you get your polygons from the Land Registry. Providing the wider area shows these small pockets of land, such as alleyways, ginnels, little spots between houses. It just gives you that more intelligence to find out, whoa, we actually don't own this area. We thought we did own this area. Why is it unregistered? Should we have registered it? A stock swap or a major one from local authorities, and bits do get missed. So this wider data actually provides you with details of what you don't own, or what you actually think you're liable for, but you're not liable for. So it provides the wider area. It gives you greater insight into neighbouring landowners as well. Say, for example, you've got a tree overhanging your asset. You'll be able to find out who actually owns the land where the tree is based. Okay. Another area which we look at is what is actually in my area of interest. So on the next slide, we'll go back to the Brighton example, where we look at, if you're a local authority, you can look into your whole area itself. So what is in my local area? Social housing provision. What's the social housing provision like in my area? How many social houses are there? An important question, if you're looking at building partnerships with these social housing providers, is what type of social housing provider? Who are they? As many of you know, there's hundreds and thousands of houses with various different social housing providers. So in your area, you could have 5, 10, 15, 20 social housing providers. This data set enables you to find out who those social housing providers are and build up relationships with those organizations. You know, who has built up land banks in your area? Who owns all the brownfield land in your area? Are there any companies building up land banks in your areas? Any housing associations building up? Are there any areas of land that are going forward in the local development plan? It just gives you greater insight into who owns what, where. So this proves very, very popular with our government organisations, our local authorities, and now with the relaxing of the licensing around this as well, more and more organisations have been requesting areas of interest rather than just specific organisations itself. And on the next slide, the final example of how organisations actually utilise the data is they want to fact find an organisation. So, you know, we can search on any organisation and provide you with the holding itself. So if you want information on company A, you're looking at a merger or an acquisition itself, you know, what do they own? Where are all their housing stock? Where are all their green spaces? You know, we can differentiate between the housing and the green spaces utilizing other data sets, EPC data and master map itself. You know, if you're looking for geospatial intelligence on your competition with regards to land, houses, this is the data set which is essential to work with. So just a quick summary before I hand over to Simon is that, you know, we provide you with the geospatial data to enable you, in summary, to actually ascertain what you own, what you don't own, what is my area of interest, and what insight can I actually obtain on a company. So I'll now hand you over to Simon. He'll give you a quick run through of utilizing the data in Cadcorp software itself.
Thank you, Lee, and good morning. So in my demonstration today, I'm going to be showing you a number of use cases for the land registry data. And these will include examples from housing associations, commercial landowners, and local authorities who can benefit from the data. Now, first of all, I'll introduce the land registry data in our web map application, followed by some use cases. Then for the second part of the demonstration, I'll show you some of the different types of analysis you might perform with this desktop. So Cadcorp Web Map can be used to publish a map of GIS data to a wider audience. And this allows your colleagues, contractors, or members of the public to view spatial information in a web browser. Now, if I go to my map features, I can turn on my layer of ownership. So these are all of my land registry polygons that are registered to my organization. And I can also turn on the commercial and corporate ownership data. And if we just zoom into the Brighton area a little bit more closely, I have themed this layer by amalgamating the company categories into my own groups. So I've themed the data as Lee showed us or showed you by housing association, limited companies, and local authorities. So really quickly on the map, I can see an overview of the type of ownership in these areas. But for now, I'm particularly interested to see who owns the land around one of my specific assets. So I can use the search at the top to navigate to my asset in question. So to do this, I'm going to type in a postcode. And we'll navigate to that location on the map. So on the map, we've got that sort of light red or pinkish color, which shows all of my organization's ownership. And then all the other colors are from the commercial and corporate ownership layer. So if I were to interrogate a location, so let's interrogate above this orange area here, I can see on my ownership layer that I own the freehold for this specific location, but also from the commercial and corporate ownership layer, I can also see we've got a leasehold to another organisation. Now, there are a number of benefits of knowing who owns the land or properties around your assets. So my organisation could maybe negotiate property or land transfers. Maybe we could retrieve service charges from the other organisations whose tenants might be sharing the communal spaces that my organisation maintains. Or perhaps we can generate additional income by offering managed services to these other organisations. On the map, we can also perform some analysis to kind of understand what the breakdown of commercial ownership is within this area. And to do this, I'm going to use the editing capability in WebMap. So what I'm going to do, I've got a layer here to create a kind of an ownership summary. So I'm going to draw my area of interest on the map very quickly. And then once completed, I've got a nice summary of the ownership within this area. So I can see just based on the square meterage, we own over 3,000 square meters of land in this area. But also we can see the most significant landowner within this area of interest is limited companies. So this is a really useful summary just to see what land is registered and to what type of companies. So my organisation is always on the lookout for development potential. And the best place to start is to look at land that we already own. So garage blocks are often good for knocking down and replacing with new properties. So if you've got an assets and liability register with garages listed, this could be a good starting point. And with the land ownership data overlaid with your garage information, you can double check that these garages fall within your land ownership. It can also be beneficial to check whether any of your land ownership is registered as brownfield land. And these are sites considered to be appropriate for residential development by local authorities. So I've got some registered brownfield data available in this map. So let's turn that layer on and go to the extent of the Brighton area. And on the map, I can see all of the brownfield sites that are available within the Brighton area. And I also have a layer showing all of my land ownership polygons that intersect these brownfield sites. So I could zoom into these sites individually and maybe interrogate them, or I'm going to use search by area to generate a list of sites within a particular area of interest. So I'm going to query my land ownership data that intersect with brownfield sites, and I'll just draw on the map my area of interest. And then once complete, it finds all of those sites within that area of interest, and we get a table view of that information. With this, I can also choose to download the results to CSV, so I can use these externally from WebMap or include them within the report. And maybe with this analysis, my organisation can maybe assess the feasibility for progressing development on these sites. Local authorities give landowners the opportunity to put forward their own land for potential development. And these might be sites that can be added to the local development framework or the housing economic land availability assessment. And these sites will require preliminary assessment for the suitability. Now, local knowledge in WebMap can be used to perform this initial assessment. So I've been given a site to assess, and I could use the search facility at the top there to navigate to the location, or I can just use the pan and zoom controls to navigate to that site. So the site in question is this area at this playing field. And once I'm here, I can now run my local knowledge. So the administrator can set up a number of predefined queries against your business data and then present the results of these queries to the user in a friendly way. So first of all, I've run a query against the land registry data to tell me the land ownership at this location, because it's important to know who owns the land here. I've got information about the title number, which I can use to maybe request the title information from the land registry. I can also see that the land is freehold and it's also owned by the local authority. This type of search might also be useful if you need to conduct compulsory purchase orders to understand who owns the land. In addition to site ownership, I can see location information. So I've got the grid square that we're in from the Ordnance Survey. and just some political boundaries such as what ward and local authority we're in. And to assist with my site assessment, there are a number of queries against potential constraints that might help determine whether a site is suitable for potential development. So in these examples, I can see this site is within a national park and there are also listed buildings nearby. I can run as many local knowledge searches as I need, and I can use it to assess the surrounding areas as well. So I can find out who owns the land nearby and see if there could be any access problems for this proposed site. So local knowledge can be used to pull out this information really quickly. However, if you need a report for your evidence base when assessing potential development sites, then Find It in WebMap can do this for you. So you can define your area of search in 4 ways, but I'm going to simply place a point on the map with a 250-meter buffer roughly in the center of this site. So when I start the search, Find It will then query a large number of layers based on my search area, and then it will present everything that it finds. It will just take a few moments to process. Once completed, we can see the results within WebMap, but I can also choose to download the PDF. So all of these results are presented within a report which can be customized to your requirements. So here is my report that we've just created, and on the first page I've got information about the report or document itself. I've got some search information so we can see when the search was performed just now. And then just underneath that, we've got a map which is showing my area of search. And then on the following pages, we get to see the results of the search. So first of all, we've pulled back the land ownership information from the land registry data. So we can see that there are 2 titles within this area of search, and we've got the associated information to go with that. Again, we've got location information, so it's telling us which ward and local authority we're in. I've got information of nearest sort of neighbours or properties, just in case we need to consider them for future consultations. We've got information about historic planning applications, so this might help us with our site assessment. And then finally, to complete the document, we've made sort of queries against our local plan policies. So we can see we're in an open space area, and we've got the reference to the policy. We found we've got listed buildings nearby. We're also in a local nature reserve. And finally, we're also in a national park and garden. So Find It is a really useful tool to provide that evidence base for your business processes. So that concludes the use cases I plan to show you with WebMap. I'm now going to switch over to Cadcorp's desktop application where I can use some of the advanced tools to analyze the land registry data. So regardless of what sector you might be within, a key piece of analysis you should perform with your assets is to compare them with the land registry data. So as an example, a property owner like a housing association or a local authority might have an assets and liability register, which has a record of all known assets that might generate a rental income. So in this map here, I've got a layer showing all of the properties that I own, and I've also got a layer of the land registry polygons that are registered to my organisation. So I can perform a test in the desktop to check if there are any properties in my register that don't fall within any of the land registry polygons that are registered to my organisation. So on the left-hand side, I'm going to select my ownership polygons and then use the query builder to query the property data. We're now performing a spatial test to find those items that don't intersect. We can hit show to make sure, we'll see if we're going to get some results from our query. And then with the results, I'm going to copy them to a new overlay, and we'll call this missing HMLR titles. So the layer has been added to the map, and we can see that on the left-hand side. And if I just turn off the original property data, we can see that we've got a number of properties that don't appear to have an associated land registry title that is registered to our organisation. Now, there could be a couple of reasons for this. Maybe some of my properties are new builds and the land just hasn't been registered with the land registry yet. Maybe some of the properties are stock transfers, and again, just the land registry records haven't been updated. Or perhaps the missing polygons are associated to my organisation, but my organisation name has been misspelled in the records, and Lee provided us an example of that earlier on. I can also perform the opposite analysis. So this time I can find if there are any land registry titles that are registered to my organisation, but I don't have any property points and within them for my register. So this time I'm going to set my property data. We're going to use the query builder again, but this time we're going to query the ownership layer. Again, we want to find all of those items that don't intersect. Again, we can check we're going to get some results in our query. And then finally, we're going to copy the results of this to a new layer called missing properties. So we can now see from the results that we do have a couple of land registry titles highlighted in yellow here, where we've got no property or asset in our data. Now this may be because the asset data is just simply missing data. Maybe my organisation has acquired new land and again, the assets haven't been updated with the new acquisitions. Or perhaps we've just sold the assets and the land registry titles just haven't been updated with the new ownership. So this type of analysis can help you find the properties or land that are currently not registered. Some landowners have a requirement to maintain communal open spaces. An example might be a group of adjacent properties or an estate owned by a single organisation. They might need to cut the grass or trim the hedges or perform weed control along the pavements. It's important that these responsibilities are recorded accurately, and a GIS is the best tool for the job. Now on the map, we've got some grounds maintenance responsibilities mapped. And if I just flash that layer on and off, you can see those features. So we've got some green areas marked as grass that we cut, and we've also got some hard standing areas, which are areas we need to maintain as hard standing. To ensure I am maintaining the land that I own, the HMLR polygon data is a great resource. So if I just turn on my ownership for this area, this is identified as the red outline here. So from the map, just visually, I can already see by looking that we appear to be maintaining this area of grass on this play area, even though it's actually outside of my land ownership. So it might be that I've got a local agreement to maintain this area of grass, or perhaps we're cutting this grass when we shouldn't be, and it should be someone else's responsibility to do so. So in my map, I can turn on the commercial and corporate ownership data and interrogate the land ownership at this site. And I can see from the information it's actually owned by the local authority. So I can use this information to investigate whether we should be cutting this area of grass or not. If you can get hold of it, adopted highways data from the local authority is also worthwhile where you have property or land adjacent to an adopted highway. And if I just turn on my adopted highways data on, I can use this to check whether highway verges, for example, fall within my land ownership. And again, if I just flash on and off the grounds maintenance layer, I can see that I've mapped this area of grass to the entrance of my estate. However, it falls within the adopted highway. So although it's actually within my land ownership, the local authority should be responsible for cutting this area of grass. So using my land registry ownership data and the adopted highways data, we found areas of ground maintenance we are maintaining but shouldn't be. So my organisation could be saving money. And for large scale analysis, you can use the same approach in my previous example with the query builder to find all of your grounds maintenance responsibilities that fall outside of your ownership. Another dataset that emapsite can provide is the national tree map. And this dataset comes in 3 layers, and I have the layer which shows the polygons representing the tree crown. And the layer is themed to show the average height. This dataset is really useful for those who are charged with managing the trees, and this is especially important if you have trees in close proximity to your properties. You'll want to know if any of these trees pose a risk to your properties if they were to fall. So to find the trees that are within my land ownership and maybe within 5 meters of the perimeter, I can create a buffer around my land ownership. So if I select my land ownership, and I'm going to create an exterior buffer. So what this will do is include my land ownership polygon, but I'm also going to add an additional 5 meters around it. And there are many different options for creating buffers in SIS Desktop, and I'll show you an example of an outside buffer shortly. So I've now created my buffer, which is the blue dash there, the blue dash polygon there, and I can now use this to find all of the trees that intersect it. So again, returning back to our query builder, I'm going to query the national tree map, and this time we want to find all of the items that intersect that buffer. I'm going to just filter the original overlay, and when I hit finish, I've now filtered the tree map to show all of those trees that fall within my buffer. And as I mentioned, if I just turn this example off, I have an example of an outside buffer. So you might already know about the trees within your ownership, but this time you might just want to use a buffer like this to find all of the trees that are within 5 meters of the perimeter of your land ownership. And finally, you can also use the address data with the tree map data to find all those properties who have trees that are overhanging into your ownership. You can interrogate the address data so you can send letters to the properties to ask them to cut back their trees. So I've now come to the end of my demonstration, and I hope you found that very useful. And just to summarize, I started with Cadcorp Web Map and showed you how the land registry data can be used to find out and assess who owns the land around you, how your land ownership data can be used to assess potential development opportunities with brownfield land. I also showed you how local knowledge and Find It can be used with the land registry data for site assessments. And then I switched focus to Cadcorp CIS Desktop and showed you some use cases for auditing your own assets register with the land registry polygons to make sure that all the records are up to date. How to use the land registry to check you're maintaining the correct areas for grounds maintenance. And then for the final example, I showed you how you could use the national tree map data to manage trees that are within your ownership. So I'm now going to pass you back over to Ferguson Lee, who will wrap up and answer any of your questions.
Excellent, thank you, Simon. So just before we come on to the questions, I can see there's been some asked already, but do ask some more if you have any questions. So just some of the key takeaways, really. The land registry data is really important for lots of different tasks within the types of organisations that are managing land and responsible for land. It's really important for managing large grounds maintenance responsibilities, like many of our housing customers do. And we've seen all the intelligent querying that Cadcorp CIS Web Map and Cadcorp CIS Desktop can enable with this land registry data. Understanding ownership and responsibilities is absolutely key for the types of organisations that are managing land and properties, such as local authorities, housing organisations, but also commercial landowners, land and property consultancies. There's so many different organisations that can benefit from this data from emapsite and the technology from Cadcorp as demonstrated today. So let's have a look and answer some of your questions. Just before we do feel free to get in touch after the webinar today. Here's our contact details. We heard from Lee earlier, and Lee's email address and phone numbers there, and as are mine here at Cadcorp. If you're not one of our we can point you in the right direction within both organisations, and we're really keen to continue the conversation with you after the webinar today. So do get in touch. And let's have a look at your questions then. So we've got a few. Do continue to ask them. We'll spend a few minutes going through these just now. If we can't answer all of the questions just now, we can see who's asked them, so we can get back in touch with you after the webinar as well. So we've got the first question here from Amit. How up to date is the data? Lee, that sounds like a good one for you to answer as your Yes,
definitely. Yeah, it's a very important question. Currency of data, how up to date data is essential when you're utilizing data. No point using data 6 months, 12 months old. We actually update the data directly from the land registry every single month. So it's got an update schedule, a monthly update schedule. So yeah, that's the update schedule for land registry itself every month.
Excellent. Okay, the next question is from Martin. Can someone help me create my grounds maintenance data? Okay. Imagine you're from a housing organisation and you're wanting to create this data, as we saw in part of the demonstration by Simon there, and yeah, Cadcorp can provide you with the technology and the training to get you give you the capability to create this data. But also there's organisations out there, there's several organisations that use Cadcorp Sys technology actually to create this data on your behalf, and Cadcorp can help point you in the right direction. So do get in touch, or we'll get in touch with you and we can help you make the right decision about who can capture that data for you. So another one here from Catherine: do you provide ownership details for private dwellings? And we also have one from Lucy, which was a similar question about residential properties as well. So yeah, that sounds like a good one for you, Lee.
Yes. For private dwellings, we only provide the shape number, polygon identifier, and the title number, just the information in the national polygon data set. We can't provide details like, Mr. and Mrs. Smith own this home, etc. But how organisations work it, say for CPOs or for just looking in the wider area itself, run a quick query on private ownership and actually just obtain all the title numbers and then go to the land registry. So we can't provide the actual details of actually who owns Mr. and Mrs. Smith's house, etc. But we provide the title number, the shape ID, and the polygon identification number itself.
Excellent, thanks, Lee. We've got a few questions along the similar lines. You mentioned, this is for Lee, you mentioned earlier about the HMLR polygon dataset becoming free, and there's a question about, do you need a license? Yeah, well,
open.
There's a question about, do you need a master map license? There's another question about, maybe if you could just mention that again, Lee.
Yes, certainly. The commercial and corporate ownership data is a spreadsheet of 3 million lines of ownership information. So that data is open on an open government license, and you can obtain that on the Land Registry website page. What is a paid for data set, which we distribute, we've got distributor rights, is a national polygon data set. So the polygons, and what we do is we match the CCO data and the OCOD data. Sorry for using acronyms, but we'll be here 20 minutes if I don't make them into acronyms. We marry that up into the national polygon data set and then provide the whole data set as either a download or as a service into organizations itself. So the national polygon data set, you actually pay for that. The CCO data in a CSV format is actually on the Land Registry website. You can actually download that. We have the spatial element into it, the polygon, we max the polygons to themselves. So I can get back in any specific questions regarding that. So I'll probably email people in more detail.
Great. There's a few questions about the format that the data is supplied in, Lee. There's one question about using it in various different GIS software, and another one about specifically what format the data is supplied in. Could you answer those ones?
Yeah. Generally in shape format, which obviously Cadcorp can tune itself. But yeah, any specific format, we tend to pride ourselves on emapsite in that we can actually deliver data into pretty much any application available. So we're very common to utilize in GIS software such as Cadcorp. However, we can actually put data into a lot of applications and also deliver a number of API queries regarding obtaining the data itself. So yes, we're very flexible in the delivery and the distribution of our data itself.
Great, thanks, Lee. There's a few questions along the same line about how the pricing works as well. So is it national only or available by local government area?
It all depends. Each user case is different. We're going to be providing a lot of national coverage for a large number of our clients over the next few weeks. Government, local authorities, a number of them take it national, a number of take it on a regional level, private organisations, commercial organisations. They differ. Sometimes they take it on a company, so they want to find out information on company A, or they'll say, right, I just want this area, give me all the information on this area. So it varies, and we price suitably for that. But yeah, any sort of quote request or pricing request, just let me know, and I'm sure you'll be delighted to see the price.
Excellent. I can see there's some more questions coming through, some quite technical ones about PAI and APIs and other bits and pieces. So we're running out of time now, but we'll definitely get back to those people who've asked questions that we haven't been able to answer in the webinar today. So don't worry, we can see who's asked them, and we'll get back, the appropriate person will get back in touch with you. So thank you for joining us in the webinar today. As I said, please continue the conversation with us. When the webinar ends in just a second, the survey will pop up in your browser, maybe in a new tab, so have a look in your browser for that, and please do answer. It's just a few questions you can answer there, and continue to enable us to make more webinars going forward. So thank you for joining us today. That concludes our webinar.